so that you can ask your questions. There is a bucket on the left of the side of the stage and one on the right side of the stage. They have index cards next to them or in them or somewhere around them. If you have a question that you want us to ask, fill it out on that index card, and we will, Moderator McKenzie or myself will ask that question. If you want to ask your question for yourself, write your name at the top of your index card. We only need your name if you want to ask your question yourself. Keep in mind that you only get about 90 seconds to ask your question. So if you want to formulate your question, if you don't want to ask it, just hand it to us. And either way, hand it to us. But if you want to verbalize it yourself, write your name on that index card. So with no further ado, I'm going to ask that we would begin by each, Faye, if you would just conduct an introduction of each person on the panel so they can tell us who they are, and maybe just a little bit about the work that they do, and take no more than a minute and a half to do that.
Yep, so I want to first tell you who I am and then give each of these dynamic young people an opportunity to tell you about themselves. I am Faye Matthews. I serve as the Legal Policy Advisor and Senior Partnership Manager at the National Wildlife Federation on the Restore the Mississippi River Delta campaign. We work to inform and support the state's coastal master plan and make sure that we have enough funding to restore our coast so that we have a place to live in the next 20 years.
All right.
10.
Okay. All right. My name is Angela Bradford. I'm a student at Tulane School of Medicine. I'm getting my PhD there. I do diabetes work and cardiovascular disease, but outside of that, I advise for a Sierra Student Coalition at Southern University in Baton Rouge because I used to teach there. And so my students are really focused at first on recycling, and then when we realized how much of a hot mess that was, we're really looking into like waste, statewide management of that and reduction of that. And then we also do like comments and go to hearings when it comes to post-flood 2016 Baton Rouge and business and residential development after the flood. So just doing our best to manage climate change in the capital city.
Hi, my name is Pooja Pradeed, and I actually recently moved here from California a couple of months ago. And so my full-time job, I work at Domino Sugar, but I'm also a volunteer at 350 New Orleans. In college, I was involved with something called the Berkeley Energy Resources Collaborative, and so I worked a lot with connecting like renewable energy companies to students at our school and just kind of providing a pipeline for that sort of job sector.
Hi, my name is Gage Lala. I come from a little town called Chalmette. It's an industrial city with lots of power plants and refineries, and my goal is to try and bring climate and ecological issues to attention in my high school because there's pretty much nothing at all in the way of informing students there of the problems that we have. So that's what my goal here is, to see what I can do about that.
All right, and so Reverend, I'm just going to check in to make sure that you are going to tap me on time and make sure that I'm to pass.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll have to about 6 o'clock, but let me remind our panelists, please hold the mic as close to your mouth as possible and project. We do have those who are hearing impaired in the audience, so we need you to project. All right? And I think, so we're going to do that video first? Okay.
Yep, but before, I'm going to read a little introduction on the climate strikes that are happening across our globe on Friday, September 20th. This young lady that you're seeing on the screen is Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg began the school strike for climate movement last year by protesting every Friday outside of the Swedish parliament. Students all over the world have been joining her and have been striking every Friday in hundreds of cities to push for drastic action on the climate and ecological emergency. They are calling out our generation for decades of inaction. Inspired by Thunberg's protest last year, the strike on September 20th aims to bring awareness to the climate crisis in the days preceding the UN's Climate Change Summit. Students are asking the adult generation to join in solidarity on September 27th. I will add that at least 900 Amazon employees at the company's Seattle headquarters have pledged to walk out. Stores including Patagonia, Burton, and Lush have agreed to close their stores in support during the strike. Um, According to 350, a nonprofit dedicated to climate change awareness, at least 450 climate strikes, there are at least 450 climate strikes registered across the United States, and so far 2,500 globally. New York public schools are excusing students who are absent from school to strike with parental consent, of course. And I will add that my organization, the National Wildlife Federation, is standing in solidarity with all young people on Friday and have given us a green light to also participate. So with that said, we're going to show you a short clip. With no further ado,
Thunberg. I am 15 years old and I'm from Sweden. I speak on behalf of Climate Justice Now. Many people say that Sweden is just a small country and it doesn't matter what we do. But I've learned that you are never too small to make a difference. And if a few children can get headlines all over the world just by not going to school, then imagine what we could all do together if we really wanted to. But to do that, we have to speak clearly, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. You only speak of green, eternal economic growth because you are too scared of being unpopular. You only talk about moving forward with the same bad ideas that got us into this mess, even when the only sensible thing to do is pull the emergency brake. You are not mature enough to tell it like it is. Even that burden you leave to us children. But I don't care about being popular. I care about climate justice and a living planet. Our civilization is being sacrificed for the opportunity of a very small number of people to continue making enormous amounts of money. Our biosphere is being sacrificed so that rich people in countries like mine can live in luxury. It is the sufferings of the many which pay for the luxuries of the few. The year 2078, I will celebrate my 75th birthday. If I have children, maybe they will spend that day with me. Maybe they will ask me about you. Maybe they will ask why you didn't do anything while there still was time to act. You say you love your children above all else, and yet you are stealing their future in front of their very eyes. Until you start focusing on what needs to be done, rather than what is politically possible, there is no hope. We cannot solve a crisis without treating it as a crisis. We need to keep the fossil fuels in the ground, and we need to focus on equity. And if solutions within this system are so impossible to find, then maybe we should change the system itself. We have not come here to beg world leaders to care. You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time. We have come here to let you know that change is coming, whether you like it or not. The real power belongs to the people. Thank you.
pretty powerful. So we're going to transition to a video on local issues, just to set a deeper foundation for framing this conversation.
So I'm going to talk from up here. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good. So this is just some slides to illustrate where we are with our climate. This here shows how the temperature works break up quickly. So, and that's again how, even the thickest ice is breaking up. And that is our air condition. All this white ice reflects heat back into outer space, and the dark ocean absorbs it. So we are breaking our global air condition. This is a methane bubble exploding in the Siberia and Russia. There's a lot of permafrost that has a lot of methane. You see the people there. It gives you an idea of the scale. So the permafrost is really melting. Sorry, we'll go back. Methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas, and so the more methane melts, the more permafrost melts, the more methane in the atmosphere, the warmer it gets, the more melting, and so on. It's like a cycle that's really vicious. And we need to really, we really have to prevent that from happening. This is showing Cancer Alley or Death Alley, and we're going to look at St. James in the next picture. This is from the Port of New Orleans. This is majority black neighborhood here and here. This is majority white. The blue shows where industry is.
pointing out that I very much commend Greta and other young people for taking action on this and being urgent about it. And I want to point out also that these young people have decided to strike, not rally or march, but strike, and act with a sense of urgency. And as Greta Thunberg put it, we should act as if our house is on fire, because it is. And so I'm gonna lay out some facts and then ask the first question. Scientists find that 2/3 of our extreme weather events in the last 20 years were influenced by humans. 2016 was the warmest year on record, with 17 of our 18 warmest years having occurred since the year 2000. And I want to point out that these young people have probably been alive since the year 2000, only been alive since the year 2000. So for all of their life, this is what they've known. Our summers and winters are getting warmer. There's more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than any time in human history. The average wildlife populations have dropped by 60% in over 40 years. Sea levels are rising at the fastest rate in 3,000 years. And Indonesia is actually moving. They're actually moving to relocate their capital city because they are sinking so quickly. And there are other places that are not too far behind in the Pacific. There are about 8 islands that are looking to relocate. And we're seeing it in our backyard in New Orleans. Climate change, storms, coastal land loss, and that's supposed to increase. It's only going to get worse. So with that, I want to ask each young person here, starting with our high school student, Gage, what is your biggest concern about your future in the context of your community and the possibilities for your generation?
My biggest concern is for the future of my community and everyone in it is that people don't know about this weather. Like, they know nothing. I go to a school where I can look out a window and I see a refinery right there. I go to a school where I can see a refinery where I look up and I'm like, okay. And no one cares. No one cares that there's these companies dumping toxins into our backyards and where we live, and it frightens me. I live in a small town, and not every place is like that, but I feel it doesn't matter that every place is like that. It's the small towns where the majority of things are located, the majority of toxins are located that we have to worry about.
Okay. I think what I'm scared of is resource scarcity and how climate change can affect our food system and water and whatnot. And I'm concerned that obviously people who have means will find a way to get access to it, but I know a lot of people do not always have the means, and so I'm concerned they won't get access to it.
Just for the record, I am a 90s baby, but my biggest concern is that the system is too entrenched in Louisiana to overcome. I've gone to meetings with Congressman Garrett Graves, who's for Baton Rouge area. I still vote in that area because I want to vote against the policy they have, but I live in New Orleans, and I've also met with staff for Richmond, and there's no plan. There's just a plan to keep things the same. And so I'm so afraid that by the time they understand the magnitude of the situation, it's going to be too late.
And 2, business as usual. Yep. So for some of us, we care deeply about the planet, and I want to transition from us acting individually to the power of the collective voice, because as we see, the most recent victory in St. James, which is short of a victory because the goal is to get all those industrial plants out of there. But the power of the collective voice is really, really something that folks should be aware of and know that when you're strong and you're organized, that you can affect change. And so for me, I have a personal sense of responsibility, and for most of us, we take individual actions that we hope play into a larger solution. For instance, recycling. I'm not doing a great job at it today with my paper cup, but we recycle. We tend to we want to cut down on the amount of waste that we have. And for the most part, individually, our voices are powerful, are not as powerful as the collective voice. And so at some point, we translate feelings of powerlessness that we all have at some point into the power of the collective voice, while we tend to have our own personal responsibilities, and we have to really understand what those are. And in the end, we hope that we're part of the voice, the entire climate strike, the entire environmental movement, and demanding that things be done differently. So when did you find your voice, your collective voice, and then your individual voice, and then when did you make a decision to be part of the collective voice? So is there any incident or event that triggered the aha moment for you? This is a problem.
My main moment is really connecting back to my roots. I'm mixed indigenous with a couple different tribes. I know mainly Creek, Cherokee, and Choctaw on my mother's side, and on my father's side, I'm Western European, mostly Italian. And I think for Native spirituality, the main thing is caring for all living things, not just your other fellow humans, but everything, your plants, your animals, and even non-living things, everything about the earth. But the main thing for me is that we all have to, we all have to come together and work for the life, for the future of the lives that we want. That's what I think.
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in California, so I always was hearing about things like sustainability and like energy efficiency. So I was always like kind of like on board with it. I think it was when I went to college and I got to see a lot of inspiring like activists, like because I knew that climate change was a problem, but like in like my suburban kind of privileged community, I didn't really know like how I could get involved. But once I got to college, there were a lot of people doing like incredible work, both locally and also like nationally. Like there were a lot of students who would go to like the state senate and like say, hey, like I want you to divest from fossil fuels. And we were like successful in doing that, I think in the 90s, I'm not sure. But I think just knowing what I can do opened up like a whole world for me, because I actually just didn't know what I could do in high school. Yeah.
Individually, I think whenever I was like younger, living in Baton Rouge, and they were closing Alligator Bayou, and I wrote a letter to Bobby Jindal, which was a waste of time. But it was, I kept the letter. And so that was like individual voice forming. But just in the last couple of years, working with my students, especially at HBCUs that deal with so many different systems at once, we've committed, like my students and I have committed to include as many people as possible, because we just don't think you can get at climate change with just young people. Like we have to have everyone, especially in the US when people are living longer. So everyone matters, everyone's voice is needed at the table, and so the work's easier when you can spread it around anyway, so.
Thank you.
Babe, we're going to take one question over here from the audience, and then we're going to go back to you, all right?
Mr. Urban? Yeah, I just wanted to ask, one way to work to change the climate is to provide better public transportation so people don't use their cars. People have an alternative to get to where they have to go, public transportation. How do we get more resources dedicated to public transportation?
Well, I don't have all the answers to that, but I had been doing some research on like proposed public transportation efforts between like Baton Rouge and New Orleans. Like I don't know if you guys remember that, but I think following up on that and letting our officials know that we actually want that and it not just be a study that disappears, because there are finances and grants out there that could help Louisiana afford these things. We just have to research them or tax the wealthy.
All right, turning back to our question. Going back to what
Again, if you have a question, write it down on the card, drop it in one of the buckets to the left or the right side of the stage, hand it in either put it in the bucket or hand it to the moderator's table. And if your name is on the card, then we will call on you to ask the question. If you don't want to ask the question yourself, we will simply read the question. Either way, you need to drop it in the bucket, all right? Thank you.
Somebody took the cards that were here then?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
All right, so turning back to something that Angel said early on about the fact that we do things, but we don't always know the consequences of those things. Like you hinted at that. Like so, you said that before we act, it's going to be too late. So we do things to advance civilization. We build levees. We build plants to make energy efficiency more useful for us. But we don't always know. We don't always know. And so for people like me, I sit and work on policy at the National Wildlife Federation. We have other folks here who are in different generations who also work on environmental policy. What do you want us to hear? What are we doing that we could be doing better? What are we not doing?
This has to do with something I said earlier. My main, very big concern is that we need to educate the younger generations and bring more change to the school systems, especially public school systems, to influence children into a way of thinking that promotes productive climate work and doing things that will help the environment. Because, at least in my school, we're pretty much still on that kind of mindset that the only thing school is good for is for getting you a career in the industry.
Could you repeat the question again?
Is what are other generations doing, generations before you doing what are we doing that's not working? What can we do better?
Okay. I don't know if it's doing better because I think we have tried to reach out, but I think climate change is sometimes seen as a liberal issue, and so because of that, a lot of people, like a lot of conservatives I know, who are like they won't even like talk about the topic because they think, oh, it's like the liberal like agenda and whatnot, and like you're gonna destroy jobs. And I just wish people could understand, like the conservatives, like they have this idea that they're very responsible, and I feel like you take their values and responsibility and just apply it to the environment. I feel like we could do a better job of reaching out to, I don't know if this is a popular idea here, but I feel like if we were able to engage with them without, I don't want to use the word hysteria because it's a loaded word, but we meet them in the middle and be all like, hey, like this is going to affect you just as much or maybe more than it might affect me. So yeah.
I think what we could do a better job of is not painting all youth with like the same broad brush. Because, so for example, I have a brother who's like 10 years younger than me, and he's in high school. And so like when a strike comes up, my parents' response is not strike, it's, oh, you'll get expelled or you end up in jail or you'll end up, in confrontation with the police, because a lot of public school systems respond in that way in Louisiana. So it's really about, we have to address everything when it comes to climate change, because kids aren't even able to freely express themselves in Louisiana, like, for example, Parkland kids did last year. They just don't have the same privileges.
All right, Ms. Matthews, we're going to take 2 questions from the audience.
The first one is, which or who will run against Congressman Richmond? Which or who will run against Congressman Richmond?
Next year.
I'm working on somebody to run against him. Yeah, I'm working on somebody to run against him. So.
All right. Mrs. T. Stan, sorry.
You kind of answered some of this question. My question originally thought was, as the youth, what do you need us more mature people supposedly, but we definitely an age. What do you need us to do to help you convey the rest of the message to the rest of the world? You kind of answered some of it. But I also want to remind everyone, we have to take some risks. Some of that striking, some of that not buying products, those types of things. We're going to have to get back to that type of stuff because big business don't care. But I'm going to let you answer your question. I won't ramble. How's that?
Like Mr. Sanchez said, that's a whole other thing, is choosing to not consume products that will encourage negative climate effects, such as biking to work. Especially if you're in New Orleans, everything's like right there. You can bike or walk, usually where you work at, depending on where you live. Public transportation is another good thing. Instead of having each person drive with their own car, maybe take a city bus as much as you can, because while it doesn't get rid of carbon emissions, it certainly helps because you're taking away the amount, the wastefulness of each person having their own car by putting them all in one thing that consumes overall less carbon, puts out overall less carbon per person. And one more thing I think is that, I can't remember what I was going to say, so I'll just pass it on.
I can't think of a clever answer, but I would just say convince your friends to vote for candidates who care about the environment.
I would say when there was climate movement decades ago, somebody was out there. So we need to, whoever that was, rehone that energy and get back out there with us because we need everybody.
All right, moving on to really good answers. So your generation, separate. Y'all have a very interesting position in that you have the power of social media, and other generations didn't have that. And there was a time when if you didn't have access to an editorial page or editorial section of the newspaper, you didn't have a voice. And so those conversations were segregated to a more prestigious audience and so you didn't always have a way to touch people. And so now you have social media and those conversations are cycling faster than they have in previous times. And the conversation is more broad. So you have a broader audience, you're able to touch more people. And with that, do you feel like people your age have a better chance at getting something done on this and actually affecting change?
Me personally, I don't use much social media. I don't have a cell phone, but what I see from my community and everyone around me that's using social media is that, yes, absolutely, there's definitely more progressive people that are willing to accept these types of ideas of changing their ways of life in order to help our climate and our earth. But my main concern about social media is that we need a way to reel that back into a firm discussion about what needs to be done and bringing that into reality instead of just having a discussion of it over the internet.
To bring up something that is actually happening, so a lot of young people and people of all ages are going through something called climate change anxiety, and a lot of it is due to the fact that they see it constantly in the news media and social media. They see all these things about the Amazon forest burning, and actually my roommate, she's been tweeting on her Twitter, or my old roommate has been tweeting on her Twitter how she feels so demoralized and she feels like there's nothing she can do. So I feel not to be negative or anything, but I also think it's also important to support people who feel like there's nothing that can be done. Obviously get the help you need, but also show them oh, there is a way by either striking or by making a comment at like a local meeting and stuff like that. That being said, though, I am happy that people are very like aware of the nuances, I think, of climate change, and it's not just like, oh, like the temperature's rising, but they know a lot about, I think, the available technologies out there, and I do feel like there's more of a debate in like how to get there, and so I appreciate the nuanced debate that goes on also.
With social media, I would say it's useful in moderation. I think the same people that like have the money without social have it with it, and so I mean, for example, and not to be like harmful or hurtful, but there's a reason why it's easier for like Greta to be the face of the movement than like Native women in the Permian Basin. Like there's reasons for that, and then also we all know Facebook has algorithms, and corporations can trick those, and so the same folks that have influence outside of social have it within it, and so we can't use that as a substitute for honest in-person conversation and change.
We have about 4 questions over here, and I know we only have about 5 minutes, so we're going to try to get to these questions. Don't feel that all 3 of our panelists need to answer these questions, but maybe just one.
Ma'am, second row, what's your question? Here.
There was one of those that I was thinking one of the things that we could do is plant trees. And so I don't know if any of you have access because you still live, with your parents or they own the place of land.
Can you come up and speak in the mic so everyone can hear you, please?
Yeah, that if you have either, if you own a home where you can, the land is yours, or if you can convince, your local community, if there's an empty lot. In the Lower Nile, we have lots of empty lots. In Chalmette, there might still be some even from Katrina, and said instead of just sitting there, can we plant trees? There's a number of organizations that provide free trees, and you can.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Ben?
Yeah, I have a quick question. I've been here for. Oh, the other day. Oh, I'm sorry.
Ben has the climate change of global warming.
Oh, yeah, just when I deal with folks who are kind of not in the same circles that I'm in, I call them climate deniers. That may not be the best way to call them. But one of the things that always gets thrown back at me is this. When I originally started, I've been working on environmental issues for years on the side, and it was global warming was the main thing it was called in the beginning, and then it kind of changed to climate change. And one of the things that climate change is throw at me is that we're creating confusion by using the 2 words climate change, first global warming and climate change, to shift to climate change. But the end result is the same. You can see that.
Your question, please.
So the question is, do you think that's causing confusion among young people today who are learning, struggling with this issue?
Short answer, no, because I think climate change, like there's such a strong emotion behind, I think, both those words for most people of our generation. I don't know if you would agree. But I think climate change is actually a more accurate term than global warming, because it's not just about the warming, but all the effects that come with it.
Okay. Deacon Joey?
So I listened to your stories, and thank you. It seems like, and I'll ask this gentleman on the end, where your family came from, Indian culture, and you have a pretty good understanding of, creation care. It seems as though a lot of us have one eye on the short game, which is solving the problem, and you have one eye on the long game, and that is, how do we really care for creation? And I don't think it's about change as much as personal transformation. So I would like any comment that you may have as young people about what it's going to take for us as human beings to come about and have that personal transformation, all of us, and not point fingers or try to solve problems.
I completely agree with that. It's not just, we need change now, we do need change now. But it is most definitely, I think the biggest issue is changing people's way of life. We have to stop going from this, how can we make the most money? How can we live the most effective and economically viable life? We have to find a way to live the best, not in an economic sense, but in an earthly sense. We have to find a way to live healthily with the earth, not just on the earth. We have to find a way to intertwine ourselves with all of nature and animals and everything on the planet so that we can go back to what I think is the proper way to live, which is, not taking away as much as we give back into what we.
Have you tried asking your classmates if someone they know has cancer?
No, but we don't really have to ask because it's kind of assumed. That's how bad the situation is. It's kind of assumed that if you live anywhere near a facility that someone you know or anyone within your close family or even friends will have cancer because that's how bad the situation is. We're right there on the refineries.
Right, so that was my question, and that was a hint on how you made light bulb in your classmates.
Yeah.
Start the conversation not from your point of view of the climate change,
But from
start the conversation from who's really hurting in your circle, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Thank you very much. Faye, you can wrap it up for us, please.
Yep. I am out of time. We're out of time. But I just want you to give a round of applause to this dynamic group of young people. We're with you.
Yes.
You have a voice, and just keep pushing forward and know that changes are coming.
Yes, it is.
And because of you, I know that we can. So, thank you.
Absolutely. And we want to remind each of you young people and tell you, maybe you've not heard it before, we are planning a march from October 15th, and this for everyone in the audience too, but especially for these young people so that you can get your friends engaged. We're having a march October 15th through October 30th to draw attention to what is national genocide and very, very local genocide in St. James and St. John and Orleans Parish that is killing people along the river by these petrochemical industries and by other forms of genocide that are taking place to cause the environment of the people within our communities to be deteriorated rapidly. So we want you to join us on the march, October 15th through the 30th, and we'll get you more information about that as well too. But again, we not only want to thank you, courageous young people, for holding us accountable to what we need to do, but for holding the people in your sphere and your platform to hold them accountable. And we do expect that one day each of you will run for office and that we will have the opportunity to elect some good people to do something about this problem. And also, we want to thank Ms. Faye Matthews. You were wonderful, spectacular, and we appreciate you being on the panel tonight as well, too. Again, thank you. We appreciate y'all coming. We want to now welcome to the stage Mr. Desmond Desa, who is here all the way from South Africa. We are so grateful to have his expertise in the house tonight. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for being
here. In case anybody was questioning where do we have local climate strikes, this Friday there is going to be first through 8th graders at the intersection of Napoleon and St. Charles. They're going to be there Friday from 10 to 12, Napoleon and St. Charles. And then at Tulane, there are events starting at 11 on Friday. They're going to be in their main yard. They have tabling, they have speakers, and short march, I think. So that's at Tulane University. And then on the 27th, we have an adult solidarity strike. That's a week from now. The youth was asking for adults to join in solidarity. That's at 11:30 at outside of St. Louis Cathedral. We're going to get together for like people who we're going to break bread, have lunch together, and then we're going to have a march to One Shell Square. And we all want to wear black, and we're going to have an action at One Shell Square. It's for 11:30 on the 27th of September. And if you want to look it up somewhere, it's also on strikewithus.org. That's the global map. Strikewithus.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. We're on that too. I know there are several people from the group Extinction Rebellion, and I know there are a lot of people maybe in the house tonight that don't know a lot about Extinction Rebellion, but would like to know more. We're not going to have time to go into that discussion tonight, but maybe at a later forum. But is there someone that, if someone has some questions about Extinction Rebellion, is there someone in your group that people can approach tonight to get more information? If you would just stand up, if they can approach you tonight about more information about Extinction Rebellion and how they can get involved. Please. Okay. Thank you. What name?
Benjamin Nugent Peterson.
All right. If y'all want more information, please see Benjamin tonight about that. You got about a 30-second spiel about it?
Yeah. Yeah, we're a global group that uses nonviolent direct action to affect direct political change, to basically change policy in a broad, sweeping way to account for environmental justice and the climate crisis. There's a lot of detail that goes into how we do that, but that's, I think, easier explained if you just want to talk to me more. Something like that first.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Benjamin. All right, thank you very much. With no further ado, we are so grateful and such a blessing to have Mr. Desmond Dessau in the house tonight. So we know that we can learn from your expertise and from your work. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing. And again, if you have questions for Mr. Is it Dr. Dessau or Mr. Dessau? I'm not sure I'm right. We're just gonna call you Doctor tonight, no matter what. All right. If you have questions for Dr. Dessau, please write them on the index card. Get them up here, and we're gonna go to about 6:40 getting those questions answered. Please.
So once again, good evening, everyone. Well, I'm glad that the youth have taken the lead. The baton's handed over. Of course, young people are not going to wait for us. Change will happen in their lifetime. So since 1992, Rio Plus 10, we have had all these processes year in and year out, the UN conferences. And the climate crisis is because of our neglect, our delaying, and our attitude of compromise. We have been compromising at all these conferences where they've held all over the world, and even in my city in Durban in South Africa in 2011. And we haven't got to finality. And at the Paris Agreement, despite the signing of the agreement to reduce greenhouse gases, which creates global warming, the US pulled out of it, and Trump has pulled out of that. So it means that the biggest polluter in the world is now pulled out and refuses to acknowledge. And my country itself, South Africa, is the 10th biggest polluter in the world and number one on the African continent. So the rest of the continent is not responsible for all the pollution. And despite that, we go and get a loan from the World Bank. So on my visit to the US in 2009, to oppose the World Bank, to build the third and fourth biggest power utility in the coal-fired power station in the world in an area where there's water scarcity. They went ahead and built it and never listened. And we are now owing the debt that is triplicated. And where the corporations in South Africa have been captured in the government with all the corruption scandals and all that coming out of it. So I could talk the whole year, the whole week, the whole month on the subject of climate change and who's responsible. But I'm going to talk about the climate change. Renee, are we ready to go there? And the problems. And why we are at a period of time where we are going to be judged harshly if we don't act now. I think there's a feeling amongst us that we should delay it, we can delay it. The inevitable is here already, it's already happening. You cannot delay anything. Climate change is upon us, and it's happening right now all over the world, in the US, in the continent of Africa, in Asia, and all over, wherever you may be living. And it's the vast majority of the 90% of poor people affected the most. So we have to ask the question, can we eat chemicals and can we eat money? When the crops are all destroyed, the food is all dead, the trees are all poisoned, the fish is all dead, can we eat poison, the chemicals, and can we eat the money? That's a very question that we have to ask ourselves, and we have to know where we're going to. And just listening to the church leaders here, you have the prophetic voice. You're supposed to be outspoken. You are the guardians of this planet, of this earth. You have the responsibility to ensure that no one is treated indifferently. No one is out there destroying this earth. The church leaders have that. Okay. So I thought I'm going to present this here tonight, but I was going to present it in California when I leave for the weekend. I'm in California on Thursday, Friday. But I thought it was very appropriate to come and present it. I come from a community living in the shadow of the petrochemical industry in South Africa. So I know firsthand about cancer and leukemia and asthma. I know about my brothers and the families. I know it. I also know it through the church leaders that bury them every week. So you as church leaders should know that. We're burying people every week of cancer. So community surveillance is important. So I'm going to talk about the problem and then give some ideas of what can be done, what we should do together. So it's taking the local, the national, the continental to the global. How do you build solidarity? Right? Taking the information, working together with everybody, because we cannot do it on our own. Those that control the resources, although they are few, they control the whole world. They're not interested in this subject. You heard it from the young people here tonight. Can we move on? Yeah.
Go to the next one.
Next one, yeah. So, you know, South Africa has got 9 provinces after the democratic election in 94, after Mandela was released in 90s from prison, Robben Island, and you know that there. And I just saw that map and it's like, I don't know, we are going to present the same thing about the hotspots on the Louisiana coast. And so one of the companies, the apartheid company called Sasol, and many of you, I heard you talking about the anti-apartheid movement. When you come from human rights and justice background, you would know that the anti-apartheid movement was all over the world, right? And I'll talk a little bit about that and why we need it today. Why it's so relevant today, that movement. Sasol is an apartheid company that is privatized. And they building the biggest investment, interesting, in Lake Charles and in the US, is building a gas to liquid plant. And they're wanting to explore for oil and gas over our coastline. They've got the biggest coal-fired plants in South Africa, the Nazi technology, where they crack the coke and convert it into fuel, into petroleum products. They've been doing it from the 70s. They continue to do it. We have an abundance of coal, cheap coal. It means that they can make huge profits. So if the crude oil goes up, Sasol's in the game. They're making billions out of it. Eni is the Italian oil corporation, and Norway is Statoil. Someone saw that the Norwegians have pulled out of investing in the Atlantic Ocean, but in the rest of the continent in Africa, they're drilling for oil, looking for oil, whether it's in Nigeria, whether it's in Mozambique, or whether they're on the coastline of South Africa, where they're rushing now to drill for oil and gas off our beautiful beaches and create another deep water horizon. So oil is the big thing in South Africa. And I'll move on to the next one. So exploration, we have had to learn about the science through many of our relationships with the US and Greenpeace and other groups. We know about seismic testing. We know it's killing the whales and the animal and the marine life and all that stuff. And we know that Africa is open for bullet holes. It's going to get worse now that Saudi Arabia has been bombed and the oil is on fire there, right? It's going to be making it much more urgently to get into Africa, get back into Nigeria where they can't go back. And I was in Nigeria on the 6th of the night, on Ogoni land. You're aware of Ken Saro-Wiwa, how he was killed by the Sani Abacha regime, complicitly with shell in the tender. They couldn't get back because they've destroyed all the rivers are full of crude oil, the land is destroyed, the food is destroyed, people are unemployed. They've got to walk miles to get fresh water. I just got back from the Niger Delta, so I know fully well about it. I know what they're busy doing out there, what they're doing in the rest of Africa, and which they want to do in South Africa as well. So we're saying they create jobs. They do not create jobs. Gas and oil exploration create 5 jobs. It's in their documents. I've read their documents inside and outside on the environmental impact assessments. Those that study geography and all that will know that. Only 5 specialist jobs. But what they say is that, so I say, how are you going to prove? We've got 50% of the young black people in South Africa that are unemployed. That's why we've got a ticking time bomb. That's why there's so much of violence, so much of protest. People haven't got jobs, despite the fact that we are the biggest, the largest industrial complex on the continent. People are still unemployed in South Africa. 25 years after democracy, we're still living in inhumane conditions. Poverty is increasing. Right, no, that's fine. So this is what they want to do. The green is all the oil and gas. And so if you look at all the ExxonMobil, all the corporations are all there, including the guys from Texas. The Texas, I call them the Texas cartel, oil cartel. And then you've got the yellow, that's all the shale, fracking. Right, the yellow on the seaside, all the green is all the sea, so 50 kilometers out of sea. Every block has been sold by the former president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma. Huge backhands, corruption, corporate capture. Huge cases, huge inquiries going on in South Africa at the moment of all the corporate capture and how big corporations have bought, have destroyed our governments. It's happened all over the continent. It's happening in South Africa in a democratic government, and I'm sure it's happening here as well. But shale gas is all the yellow, and we're pushing back on that. And a lot of it is to do with the rich commercial farmers, but also black peasant farmers. And they've come together and they put a stop to it. The green and gold, the green is what was, last week interesting, we had a international conference on refinancing the fossil fuel industry. Moving the money away, and one of the issues I'll talk about later as I end my what we can do jointly. So I arrived in Cape Town in the morning, and what hits me in the face is that Sasol has been given approval and other companies have been given approval to explore for oil and gas. So I've left a team of young people trying to push back and appeal that. So I'm not there when they're going to do the strike on the 20th, but that's good. They take responsibility. I'm going to be in the US, and wherever strikeout is happening, I will join. So that's the oil and gas, that's the entire country. The gas network is the entire country. So we won't have land. The land was supposed to be given back to the black peasants of South Africa. And now the land has been taken right under their nose. 77% of the land is owned and living on 13% of the population. The vast black majority living in squalor, inhumane conditions, in shacks, settlements, living in high-rise buildings, living in migrant hostels, very overcrowded in those communities where you don't have space to even breathe. If you go through to South Africa, to Cape Town, whether you go to Durban, where I come from, 500 settlements, in Cape Town it's the same, in Johannesburg. But what's making it even worse is that where the oil and gas have been explored for in the rest of the continent, whether it's in Tanzania where the coal mines are, whether it's in Malawi where the Australian and Canadian mines are, whether it's in Kenya where the oil has just been found, where people have now pushed back on Lamu to win the case against the coal terminal there, or whether it's in Nigeria where the oil and gas, massive oil and gas in Nigeria. And if you go there, you can see the poverty staring you in the face. You can see the conditions. So the question is, who benefits?